Hi. Today I want to talk about something that has been on my mind for a while. I think it's kind of in the realm of cultural appropriation, but at the same time, I don't know if that's the overall terminology I want to use to summarize everything, because I think it's a bit more complicated than that. Also, this is my first video essay, so be nice. So with this video, I want to talk about the obsession of pick and mixing different cultures when it suits you, not really thinking about why you're doing it and who you're doing it for, just doing it to kind of fit these different trend cycles in the pursuit of purpose or fitting in. Overconsumption, greed, appropriation, whatever we want to call it. It's here and it stinks. Wearing all these cultures like gloves, none of them really fit properly, but you're just trying them on because they're easy and accessible and by hand. So where to start with There's Rice at Home? Obviously it comes from this diasporic attitude of kind of waiting to get home to eat something or consume something. Because I don't know about you, but growing up, if I passed like a fast food restaurant and I was like, Mom, I want some fries, she's like, there's rice at home. And I think it just really embodies this idea of like, there's so much better things for you at home, like that you can provide for yourself, that you don't have to go and explore or kind of indulge in these external things. So I think it's a perfect embodiment of this kind of discussion that I want to have. Things at home which are usually better for you and more suited to you. So I kind of want to take this from a different angle and really highlight the tension point between performativity versus authenticity. A never-ending battle. And I know authenticity gets thrown around as a buzzword, but in this instance, let's just call a spade a spade. And I blame the trend cycle for people's kind of reluctance to want to think for themselves, because it's so easy to be told what to do rather than thinking of what should I actually do. Like validation really is the enemy of sense, and I feel like people are kind of seeking these external things, social climbing, of fitting in. So many things contribute to this idea of like brainlessness, of people just following the next thing without realizing the damage that they're doing and the damage that they're leaving behind. And this reminds me of this Grim Reaper meme that we always see of the person going from door to door and leaving damage and chaos in its path. I think this personifies it perfectly. And this cycle can be broken down into 5 stages. The first one, discovery, let's say of like a marginalized group or a subculture or a non-Western value. And really the cogs are turning in ways that kind of will make this benefit that person without actually digesting the full culture. And what's the smallest part I can take with the maximum gain? Next is fixation, like you've discovered this thing, how do I make it about me? How do I benefit from it? How do I kind of make it something that makes sense and can fit into my aesthetic or way of life easily? Here is where like kind of cultural value gets stripped and the age of context kind of disappears in this pursuit of personal gain. Trends and culture are always take, especially when it comes to brands, but more to come on that. The next stage is detachment, and here we kind of move further away from the original culture and more towards the mainstream variant of how this can be marketed to a majority of people. It's isolated into one singular thing that can now be more attainable for the everyday person. Now comes a big problem. It's all a problem, but the idea of this mass consumption, a lot of the time this is people's first touch points with the culture or custom, and people engage with it without knowing where it's from or why it is or how it is. And then finally, after culture's been discovered, fixated on, detached and consumed on a mass scale, then disposed of. What mainly inspired me for this video was 2 things. One, the kind of use of AAVE and like these kind of black codes that we see throughout pop culture, music, fashion, and like the kind of disregard and the lack of credit given to Black community and the reluctance to put in what you take out. Like I think a lot of the times these things should be like a push-pull, but it's often one-sided. And secondly, the Chinese of it all. Like it's suddenly so trendy to be Chinese. I'm obviously not Chinese, so I'm going to rely on some Asian creators and some resources to help me kind of formulate what I'm trying to say in these instances. But genuinely, I don't want to group everything into this bucket of cultural appropriation because I think it's kind of a bit more nuanced than that. No, I hate the word nuance, sorry, another buzzword, but I don't know another word. Instead, I want to coin the term cultural sponging. Can I even coin terms? I don't care, I want to do it. I'm defining it as the absorption of traditions, customs, identity, this kind of hunt and desire for self-betterment. Thinking, how can I reduce this down and concentrate on the parts that are most beneficial for me? Cultural stripping, if you will. No lived experience, no thoughts, just vibes. Sometimes in the form of appropriation, sometimes not. I think the overall takeaway that I want people to gain from this video is 9 times out of 10, you have so much more to offer in yourself and wanting to pursue these things that have no relevance to you. There's so much you can do for yourself, with yourself, and you don't have to kind of search for these external or cultural things that have no relevance to you to help get you to that next level, or get you to that next stage, or get you that thing, or kind of ease you from this and unburden you from this. You know, there's a lot of things you can do for yourself by yourself. Don't be that old, worn out sponge at the bottom of the sink. Sad, ran through. Like, really think about what you're consuming and how you want to reflect yourself in your identity. Culture comes and goes. Sometimes it's forever if you're lucky or unlucky, and other times it kind of just passes with the wind. The latter, kind of a privilege to some, but a hindrance to others. And this TikTok really did make me laugh because I think it's such an over-exaggeration, but really does kind of hone in onto this idea of cultural absorption without really thinking or noticing you're creating this person that is not you. It highlights a really common theme amongst adopted culture. And we play her.
Oh, that's not...
Hi.
Hi.
Your outfit is eating.
Wait, I'm screaming.
Wait, same.
Oh.
Literally.
Wait, it's giving icon.
No, because you're giving diva.
Clock it, clock it.
The way I need to know your name.
No, because same.
Okay, let's say it on 3.
Okay,
One,
2,
two,
3.
three. Paige.
What?
It's finding trouble separating your own personality with something that you want to feel personable by doing. If it's like slang, way of talking, mannerisms, all these different things really play into how people perceive you. And I think a lot of the time, people are showing up as someone who they want to be rather than someone who they are. And don't get me wrong, like, two things can be true at the same time. I think it's fine to pursue a new identity and really tap into these different instances of your personality. But you just have to think, like, when is it actually you? It's fun, it's relatable, it's of the time, slang can be fine, but like when it's a caricature, not so much. And when it is adopted and doesn't really make sense, I'm not coming at it from I'm offended kind of way. It's more so like, does this make sense for you kind of way? And it makes you question, why are things that are already in your avenue not enough to kind of shape and mold your identity? Of course, we're always borrowing from other cultures, like we live in such a multicultural society, but when you're taking more than you're giving, that's when it becomes an issue. Everyone wants a piece of the cake, but sometimes bangers and mash are okay too. And we see this in language a lot as well, like adding those extra L's in your girl and like really rolling your tongue, like, is it necessary? It doesn't make you more interesting, it makes you annoying. And I feel like girl is such a good example of a word that is just so throwaway. It's so easy, it's so cute. But instead it's been kind of co-opted to represent this idea of like attitude. I love an exaggerated girl from, I don't know, like a Texan, you know, like, yeah, like South, from the South. But when some twink puffs his iced strawberry bubblegum 3000 vape in my face and is like, hey girl, as a sense of like endearment, no girl. Like, whatever happened to hello, hi.
How are you?
My name is, you know? Also sidetracking a little bit, but this really reminded me of when artists used to just appropriate like it was an oxygen. The first thing that came to mind is Katy Perry in that Dark Horse video where she's like an Egyptian goddess. I really wish I could add in a clip, but usage rights. And there are endless examples like Coldplay with Rihanna, Rita Ora, like all these people who are kind of adopting these cultures, not necessarily in an offensive way, but obviously to kind of market and deem themselves to be a bit different from the norm. Not to say these songs weren't bops, like at the time, like I didn't know any better. I was like, wow, this slaps. I want to be an Egyptian god. And that's the thing, like two things can be true at once. You can enjoy something and you can also notice that it's kind of wrong and you shouldn't be doing it. 2 words, Gwen Stefani. To this day, I'm so confused why she had those women in the cages. Like, an honorable mention, only because I saw this tweet, is Lady Gaga in their Video Phone music video. And I saw someone say that artists need to start cultural appropriating again. And I kind of get it, but don't do it. A lot of the time in these instances, people knew what they were doing in terms of like copying a culture, but this wasn't so frowned upon as it is now. And it was kind of more of this on-the-nose appropriation. The concept of on-the-nose appropriation is kind of mad, but you get what I mean. What I'm trying to say is that there are multiple instances of like this sneaky appropriation that kind of, they try and fly under the radar, but we can kind of see the elements of culture included, but no credit is given and the work is kind of produced and created as this original thing. And I want to take this moment to shout out for Tinashe for inspiring our whole generation. She does not get her flowers half as much as she needs to. I saw this tweet and I was just like, speaking of Copton without giving credit in this scene, I feel like K-pop is sometimes quite notorious of doing this, especially from Black and brown artists, kind of stealing aesthetics, choreo, lyrics, all these kind of instances that are deemed cool in our society that can be kind of marketed to a global audience. Actually, the perfect example of fuck around and find out is when Korean artist RT, I think they were called, copied Isolde's whole music video, like frame by frame by frame by frame. It's generally insane. And I feel like this industry kind of has gotten away with it for so long. They knew that they could, or they thought they knew that they could push it this far to kind of emulate the whole video, but no. Do you know how much audacity you have to do this? Like how much context and history of doing this repeatedly for years that you kind of feel like this is something you can get away with? And I feel like this scene is genuinely less tolerant towards Black people, really adopting the culture, but not the people. And this creator puts it perfectly.
Since really the dawn of K-pop, so much of its influence is from Black creators, Black artists, Black culture. To see the industry be so influenced by Black culture and yet disrespect it at so many turns.
This is generally in the context of Cat's Eye, but I think nonetheless still super relevant to this topic. But as I was saying, this kind of age of co-opting and copying the culture without having any regard for the community and the people who built it and the context is really damaging, and you can kind of see this pursuit of being cool and marketable as a primary goal to kind of succeed as an individual, as a group, as a business, as a brand. You know, all these things do play into one another. And people will, of course, market themselves in a way to try and make them be a better person. I found this especially with this whole Chinese New Year trend that happened during the New Year, which people adopted and didn't really think much about it. I think this creator's lived experience is really interesting in the way that she was kind of labelled as Chinese, even though she wasn't Chinese. And it's a really interesting way of perceiving it, because when someone's culture is kind of forced on you due to how you look, versus when you kind of adopt someone's culture as an option, as a choice, as an add-on.
When I saw a bunch of white girls saying that they were in a very Chinese time in their lives and that they were celebrating Chinese New Year, I didn't have anything to say because I'm not Chinese. And then I remembered I was, less than 5 years ago, when people accused me of eating dogs, cats, and bats because I was clearly Chinese and being Chinese was associated with being dirty and unclean. At that point in time, being Chinese was a bad thing. People were claiming to be anything other than Chinese.
I think it's such a strange thing to see prejudice turn into privilege for a select few. And there are so many intricacies of Chinese culture that we'll never understand beyond just celebrating the year. And again, it always comes down to this point of self-improvement, self-betterment. How can I do this to make this better for myself? Like, what can I benefit from a culture that has nothing to do with me? And of course, there's humor in the ridiculousness of this. And I even had the experience of a colleague kind of panicking because they washed their hair and they completely forgot it was Chinese New Year. And even myself, I was like, oh my God, like, should I be doing this? Like, have I done this? Like, it's just insane how we think about these things without even thinking about them. But I want to leave this here because I think it's a bigger discussion point that I don't think I'm well enough versed to speak about this topic at length. I'm going to leave some resources in the caption below with some Asian creators that really do talk about this and do it a lot more justice. And back to this kind of mindless adoption of different things, I think there's something really interesting, almost funny, about kind of doing things without really thinking about it. And I think there's this difference between intentionally plagiarizing something and mindlessly following trends. I feel like fashion is kind of at the intersection of this, just mindlessly appropriating. I came across this video recently from this creator who kind of speaks about the emergence of this trend of adopting Chinese, Asian customs, cultural garms in a more streetwear lens.
The fashion industry's trend cycle is designed for disposability. Reducing Tang jackets to a trend strips them of thousands of years of history, craftsmanship, and cultural meaning.
And I think what really resonated with me was this idea of a fashion trend cycle. And what Vanessa was highlighting is this idea of cycles being finite, especially when watered down to kind of suit this mainstream palette. Culture shouldn't be consumed or optimized for short term because it's been built over time, it's been cultivated, it's been lived. So this idea of for now and for this trend doesn't really make sense. Another creator spoke about the power of clothes and how it's not just clothes. And this really made me think about when I see white people with dreadlocks. And it's just like, it's not just hair. And then they're like, oh, but the Vikings. I'm just like, it's not the same thing. Like, let's use this. But anyway, I digress. This video is kind of a really nice perspective of how kind of clothes shape your identity. So therefore, they have more importance than just being clothes.
Let's talk about trends. Now, trends aren't bad, okay? But most people use them as identity shortcuts. When you don't fully know who you are yet, it feels easier to borrow.
And this idea of her touching on belonging is a really interesting one because people have an innate desire to fit in. Everyone wants to be liked. Everyone wants to be praised. And I think highlighting this power of clothes and the power of how you dress and the kind of the link to confidence and the link to identity and the link to all these things that represent yourself is a really key one. And I think my take from this is that although we're all looking for this kind of sense of community and reassurance, I feel like this should come from kind of kinfolk or earned community rather than trends or cultures that you kind of have no business being associated with. It goes beyond traveling to Southeast Asia or Africa to kind of find yourself and really rediscover who you are under the roof of those less fortunate. That is what it is. It's when culture becomes a commodity, stripped of any tradition in the place of convenience or adoption or aesthetic. And Cyber, can we please stop uploading pictures, images, content of people in these countries? It's weird, especially kids. Like, I thought we were so past this, but I've been seeing it so much recently. These aren't props in your journey of self-betterment. Like, these are people that have real lives. Yes, they could be nice to you. Yes, they can be friendly and like reacting to you taking photos of them, but that doesn't necessarily give you the right to post them. And I think it's quite interesting to understand just because someone gives you consent to do something doesn't mean you should be doing it. It's just really distasteful. And I see a lot of people with like local shop owners or like restaurant workers. These people are doing jobs. You know, they're not clowns to entertain you. I'm not saying every instance of someone uploading someone from these countries is wrong. I think context is important, but intention is as well. So just think about why you're doing these things and why you feel it's necessary to kind of build this aesthetic of other people. And what I'm trying to say is like traveling to these countries shouldn't be your entry point for self-help. It shouldn't be your first point of contact for bettering yourself. I think it's fine to explore these countries from a point of education, from a point of kind of cultural understanding, but when it comes to using these kind of experiences to fill gaps in your own identity, that's when it gets icky. And these gaps are kind of filled with top-line touch points of different cultures. You're kind of pick and mixing again of things that you want to adopt for yourself that are the most palatable, that are the most easy, that are the most beneficial, and then brought back home and instilled in your everyday life. It doesn't make sense out of the context of where it comes from. And I think Prerna Menon kind of summarizes this really well. She says, in the Western wellness industry, South Asian traditions such as Ayurveda, yoga, breathwork, and meditation are often repackaged as a historical, trendy self-care activity. The colonialization of these practices dilutes their rich historical, spiritual, and cultural value, ultimately reducing them to commodities ready for eager Westerners to mindlessly consume. Like, this is like the perfect embodiment of what I was speaking about. Like complete mindless absorption. It's fine to practice, but don't appropriate. If it comes from a sense of belonging, desperation, purpose, then maybe question why you're doing it. Because at the end of the day, it's going to do you more harm than good for the culture. You aren't building authenticity and longevity to these short-term instances, so you can't expect long-term results. And that's a lot of the time where people kind of adopt these cultures. And I see this a lot of brands, especially kind of co-opting these communities and like tapping into these different cultures, these subcultures. I really don't understand their obsession with bridging the gap. They're bridging the gap whilst also narrowing it for the people that the culture was even intended for. And again, once your culture becomes a commodity, it's less accessible for you. It's fine for there to be a gap. There's a reason why there's a gap. You know what? Let's bring back gatekeeping. I think 2026 and beyond needs to be gatekeeping era. But I get it, these days it's quite impossible because everyone has a mouth, everyone has a phone, everything is so accessible, everything is so easy. And of course there are a lot of cultural benefits to the kind of opportunity of this digital culture exchange. But also it's really important not to expect to understand it or know how to interpret it or know how to live it through these kind of snippets that you see online. Because a lot of the time these snippets are orchestrated. They're polished to kind of fit aesthetics and fit different people's visions of how they see the culture. And this creates issues with this being kind of people's main introduction to the culture through the internet, through the screen. It's 2D, you know, there's so many different things, there's so many nuances, there's so many things you don't see behind that square or that rectangle or whatever format you're viewing it on. And when you're seeing it through someone else's lens, that's their interpretation. So you can't really build on someone else's interpretation and have a true, lived, authentic experience of the culture. I think it's completely fine, but just think, how much are you indulging? And should you be indulging it? And are you indulging it for the right reasons? Also, how are you refilling the cup that you're taking so much from? Like, sure, your glass or cup can be half full, but like, what does it consist of? Because it's most likely not the same stuff that you started with, and that's an issue. All you need is yourself. Like, it sounds corny as hell, but I think people really do underestimate the power that they have in themselves and like what they have to offer from a cultural perspective, from a lived experience. Like, there's so many things that you have gone through that other people haven't, and vice versa. I think there's beauty in everyone being different and everyone having different cultures and not necessarily fully understanding, but kind of appreciating what they see and how other people choose to live their lives. So it's important to like really take time to learn yourself and learn about yourself and learn what you actually like without some of these external influences kind of shaping your identity and shaping how you should look based on what you consume and kind of what you do. So put the guacha down, turn it inward, and think about what you can do with what you already have without having to ride the coattails of someone else's culture.